Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I see people are still joining the meeting. I just want to check if our host is in the room. Nicola, are you in the room?
Yes, I'm in the room.
Hi. Are you able to put your camera on? Don't know if the
It's
video is
on.
disabled.
I can see it.
Okay.
Hi, Elizabeth. Hi, Jean-Claude, Christine,
Hello.
and
Hello, it's still good morning here.
good
Hi.
morning.
Morning, everyone.
So I just want to check. I don't see your camera going on, and my video is on, but I don't think my video is showing.
It is showing.
Is it showing?
Mhm.
Okay, so cool. I just don't see you. I wonder if. Oh, there we
Let
go. There
me.
we go. There we go.
Ah,
There we go. Okay, I'm looking at my second screen. Awesome. So, Nicola, do you want to kick off? It's 3 minutes past 12, but I can see people are still joining. Do you want to wait another minute or would you like to kick off?
let's give it another 2 minutes because I know we had
Okay,
quite a few people signed up.
that's right. So we can then start at five past 12.
And maybe for people who have just joined, tell us where you are joining us from, which institution, which part of the world. I'm joining you from Rhodes University today, out in the Makanda in the Eastern Cape of South Africa.
I'm joining from the University of Mpumalanga. My name is Mona Ben Matiwani.
Oh, well, welcome, Mona Ben. And I see we've got colleagues in the chat from UNISA, University of KZN, University of KwaZulu-Natal. Laura joining us from Cape Town. Hi, Laura. And Thea, CUT in the Free State.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello,
Welcome.
Hello.
I'm joining from University of Mpumalanga. My name is Vakeleno Pongoza.
Ah, welcome, Bakalele. And we've got colleagues from USAF, UCT.
And Nigeria.
Of course, we have one of our speakers who is from Nigeria today. So just to let everyone know, and I can see it's now 5 past, it's lovely to see colleagues from a range of institutions who have decided to join us today. And we've got a very, very exciting discussion ahead of us. So the topic for today is learning analytics in South African higher education in the age of AI. And this session is a collaborative webinar with that's brought to you by Universities of South Africa, Digital Education Community of Practice. So the DELT CoP, Digital Education Learning and Teaching, as well as the Southern African Association for Institutional Research, a Learning Analytics Special Interest Group, and the Haltasa Digital Learning and Teaching Project Team. So I'm a member of Haltasa, and our first speaker is Elizabeth Boy, and she is with the Southern African Association of Institutional Research and leading that, involved in that Learning Analytics Special Interest Group. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little introduction to Elizabeth, and each of our speakers today, we've got 4 speakers, as you've seen on our flyer. We've got Elizabeth Boy, Dr. Jean-Claude Lemons from University of Pretoria, Professor Christine Ofulu, who, sorry if I didn't say your name right, but I'm sure you will correct me when we introduce you, who's from the University of, National Open University of Nigeria, and Rogers Kalisa, who's a postdoctoral researcher at the Department of Education in the University of Oslo. So before each person, I will introduce them, and just to let you know, I'll keep track of, as your facilitator today, keep track of all the questions that you share in the chat. So if you have any questions, I will be collating them so that our presenters don't miss them. And yeah, if so, feel free to share your questions. And if you can please mute your video and mic if you're not presenting, that'll be great. Thank you for sharing that flyer again. So that's got more detailed info with some links to some of the organizations that I've just mentioned. But I'm going to hand over to Elizabeth. But firstly, to introduce Elizabeth Boy, who's the head of business intelligence and data architect at the University of the Western Cape. And she's leading their institutional data strategy, advancing student success and evidence-based based decision making. She's also the president of the South African Association for Institutional Research and drives the professionalization of institutional research and strengthens data literacy capacity across higher education. And some of you might even know her from her involvement in the Siyaphumelela initiative. And Elizabeth's work focuses on data literacy, AI governance, and ethical analytics. And she's currently doing her doctoral research focusing on AI integrated learning analytics and fairness. So yes, very, very busy lady. And thank you so much, Elizabeth. Elizabeth's going to give us a little overview today to help us have this shared understanding. You know, a lot of us have seen terms like data mining, learning analytics. I mean, this is a big field, and I think Elizabeth's going to help us to clarify that. So over to you, Elizabeth. Okay, we can see your slides. Thank you, Elizabeth. We're just not hearing you and seeing you yet. I'm just checking. Am I the only one not hearing Elizabeth? Laura?
Also
Janet?
can't hear her. Also can't hear her.
Okay.
Oh, can't hear anything.
I can't hear something.
Okay, thanks. Elizabeth has just checked your audio. Okay, she's unshared. Probably just enabling that again. So while we are waiting, just to let you know, this is an incredibly dynamic field, and I'm sure you're going to see that from today. Even though we're looking at South African higher education, it's also about, you know, what is this dynamic field about, and to demystify it. You know, these big terms, learning analytics, educational data mining, student analytics, which sometimes sound like very big, scary, complex concepts. Elizabeth, are you ready? You can let us know. Okay, great. You're a co-host now. You should have all the rights you need. Okay, good question from Laura as we are waiting. What do we associate with the word analytics? Perhaps you can pop your thoughts into the chat. What do you associate with the word analytics? Christelle says data. Moses says insights. Marianne also says insights, statistics and evidence. Luna says informed opinions. What else do you associate with data? Trends and patterns. Thank you, Nomakaya. Relevance and responsiveness, dashboard. Decision making. Oh, thank you so much. So yes, we have some initial ideas around analytics and what we associate with them. Jean-Luc, I know while Elizabeth, I'm not sure if your audio is working, if you're ready. Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yay!
Oh gosh, I'm joining through my phone. I'll try and do my presentation over the laptop and see if it works. So let me.
One of those tech gremlins days, we understand.
Oh, I do. I do. I hope everything will go well. And this happened after.
There we go. We can see it says start screen sharing.
Okay, so there we go.
Yay, Elizabeth, over to you.
Thank God everything works. So I'm gonna put on, hopefully my camera works. Oh, my camera works on here, but it doesn't wanna work on my audio. Okay, so thank you everyone and good afternoon. I apologize for the technical problems or challenges. So my task is easy. I'm not going to spend a lot of time because I think we've got Rogers and Jean-Claude, as well as Christine, who will give more detail in terms of what they actually, and the use case and what they actually do in their own institutions on this. My role here today is just to contextualize learning analytics in the African higher education, more especially for South African higher education. As you've heard from my introduction, I think in terms of the focus of learning analytics in higher education, more specifically in South Africa, it becomes now an urgent thing that we need to focus on, because we've been doing so much in terms of other analytics and looking at student progression and looking at student analytics and looking at curriculum analytics, but we've never concentrated more around assisting students with learning and teaching efforts as well, in terms of when we want to talk about improving student success, what do we actually need to do to move beyond the big rates that we always talk about, like your retention rate, your graduation rate, and your throughput rate. But how do we get the students to understand and learn and be able to be successful at the end? And what does that mean? And what are the, I'm also going to touch on what are the areas or fields of learning analytics that exist out there that mostly are embedded within what we do in higher education in South Africa as well as global. But I'm also going to touch on some gaps in terms of what do we do, and we need to reflect on what do we need to do as higher education institution to address those gaps, and also to get our institutions to start moving towards doing learning analytics in detail as well. And that's where I'm going to start my conversation. So a little bit of a disclaimer, the work that I'm presenting today, there is no university data in it, but I'm going to show you some use cases created, not real data. They are open source data that I'm using, so there's no confidential information or records that is going to be used here. Also, the slides are Creative Commons. You can use them, you can share with them if you want access to them. There is no copyright, I'm assuming. So in terms of learning analytics, we know that it's a field that the Society for Learning Analytics and Research have coined or have really worked towards defining as a whole. So in 2011, they did define learning analytics as a measurement, collection, analysis, and reporting of data about learners and their context for the purpose of understanding and optimizing learning and their environment in which it occurs. And this also, we can see that there is a huge gap because it also talks about just measurement, collection, and analysis. As we go along through the presentation, I'm also going to talk about where the gaps are in terms of that definition itself. But in 2025, they started a task team where they started looking at defining learning analytics in different ways. And they said, it will be, learning analytics is about the collection, analysis, interpretation, and communication of data about learners and their learning that provides theoretical, relevant, and actionable insights to enhance learning and teaching. And I think with this definition, it really clearly tells you the purpose of why learning analytics is very important. It gives you an understanding or the purpose that you need to understand and optimize the learning processes and the environment. And the key focus here is about improving the educational outcome and the learning experiences. So in a nutshell, it says learning analytics is an actionable intelligence and not just data analytics. And most of the times in what we do in our own institution, especially in the Southern African institution, we're concentrating more on looking at the techniques and the collection and the analytics of it. We're not closing that loop in a way. We're just collecting the data and analyzing it, but not closing the loop. And also, I also want to bring in another definition of educational data mining. So my slides are not moving. I don't know why. Sorry. Oh, apologies for that. So in terms of educational data mining, because these are very closely linked, and this is where the majority of us are doing, is around educational data mining, which is more around the application of those techniques, the data mining techniques, the statistical, the data science, the predictive analytics, the machine learning techniques that we use to uncover patterns and predictive powers and build exploratory models around the data. And that only it talks about the methodology and the data in the process. It doesn't talk about what happens after and what type of an outcome that comes after it, what type of an interventions that comes out after it. And here the focus is more around data discovery, predictive model, refined and descriptive analytics as well. And it's more around the computing power that you have. It's not about the process, it's not about the decisions that are taken out of this. It's not also about understanding those learning processes in detail as well. But also apart from the educational data mining and all this, there are other studies or other areas that people also use, like for example, your knowledge tracing, where it looks at defining what the students are learning within the context that they are in. Like for example, looking at whether in terms of units by units, whether the learning that they have, does it translate into the next unit and the knowledge gap is retained as well. So, but those are some of type of other techniques that people are using when they talk about the learning analytics. as well. So in terms of the implementation, like I said, I'm going to concentrate on these two key terminologies and look at where the gaps are within how we implement within our own institution. And I'm also going to talk about the context, because in South Africa, the context is different to in other global north or global south, global west universities as well, and in terms of the work that they are doing. So when it comes to implementation in the global north, they also rely on the maturity of their LMS systems, where they are able to develop the resources in a way that it enables a student to learn by doing. Whereas within our South African institution, with the limited infrastructure and the type of the LMS systems that we are developing, sometimes those elements are missing within it, because then we don't look at students being the generators of knowledge, or students actively engaging with the material and developing new knowledge on that. So also because of the fewer systems that we have within our institution as well, and that goes about having enough resources and infrastructures in place. But also in terms of the implementation, it also goes around the deployment of intervention at scale. And the majority of times in our universities, we're doing it at the program level, at the unit level. We're not scaling up the intervention. Also, even if we look at it in terms of how we share system-wise, in terms of those interventions, the majority of times it is only in an institutional. So we also rely mostly on pilot projects than developing them for scalability as well. And we get stuck the majority of time in doing exploratory work. We need to start moving out of that exploratory work and move into scaling up those initiatives and the work that we're doing. But mostly in the global north, they have strong regulatory frameworks that they have defined. Even though in the South African institution, we do have like policies. Some universities, they do have those policies. Like, for example, if I can take into consideration what the work that we do in Siyaphumelela, where we do workshops around the learning analytics and the learning analytics guidelines and policies, and the ethical use of data. That's where we're trying to make sure that universities develop these policies and frameworks to guide the work that we're doing. But those gaps still exist within our system, and we need to move away from that and start developing the policies and frameworks that helps us to work around the learning analytics. But most especially, it's around personalization of the analysis or the work that we're doing. We concentrate more on equity and access than moving into how do we offer learning analytics at the personal level for those students that are struggling, those students that are in high impact modules, and how do we support them better. But we concentrate on how do we generalize and create opportunities for every student. So learning analytics implementation requires a contextualized adaptation because of different sources, different infrastructures that exist, as well as priorities. And we need to start realizing that and recognizing that in higher education, especially in South African context. Lastly, secondly, I also want to talk about the efforts that we're trying to do in the SAA, which is the Southern African Association for Institutional Research. We started the work of formulating a special interest group because we saw that there is a gap and there is a need for us to create a platform where we could be fostering the adaptation and the implementation of learning analytics within the Southern African region, because that didn't exist. And if I think about 2020 or 2018, learning analytics was fairly done within our higher education aspect. I know that there were workshops and webinars and events done to make sure that people understand and understand the definition of what learning analytics is and where the gaps are within higher education. But with SAA, we saw that that is a need for us to start expanding and exploring and making sure that we bring diverse group of people to come together to engage and talk about learning analytics and see what type of various perspective we can look at, whether is it methodology, whether it's policy, whether it's practice and process and use cases, and bring those use cases so that we can also help and assist other universities that are not yet busy with their learning analytics within their own institution to build those capacity and make sure that everyone comes along. So in a nutshell, the Learning Analytics Special Interest Group 4 SAA was around bringing the community together to facilitate knowledge exchange, to bring collaboration across the Southern African universities, not only in South Africa, but also including also those that are in the SADC region as well, but also to try and look at how do we contextualize the solutions that we need for higher education within South Africa, and also how do we influence policy and practice within our institution and scale up some of those activities across the sector as well. At the University of the Western Cape, in my almost closing session, I just want to reflect on the work and the efforts that we are currently busy with, especially when it relates to learning analytics in the University of the Western Cape. Our approach is to look at it holistically. And here we focus on looking at different types of data sources that we bring together, like the data that comes from our LMS system, data that comes from our administration system, data that comes from the surveying tools and the surveys that we run in our institution, and make sure that we use those data sets in an analytical process that also help us and enable us to identify patterns, especially with historical data around students, their performance, and be able to identify those students that are at risk and also to predict student outcome. As you can see, we haven't also touched more around the learning and the context that they are learning at. We still have a long way to go within the University of the Western Cape to get to where we want the learning analytics analysis to get to. But in a nutshell, in terms of our focus on the educational data analytics and a little bit of bringing the learning analytics space into the work that we're doing, we are trying to be proactive in terms of identifying students who require those support, tailor those support, especially for mentorship, to send them for mentorship sessions, as well as facilitation sessions as well. But also is for us to improve the patterns of how the students are learning within the University of the Western Cape. And in order for us to do this, we need a robust governance framework for learning analytics within our institution. I know that several years ago, we started a data working group where we started to engage on ethical consideration around if we want to implement this work within our higher education system, as well as within UWC, what would it take? So we need to make sure that our data privacy policies are intact. And in South Africa, we do have the POPIA. We need to make sure that whatever we do not infringe on those guidelines and those rules that we are given. But also we needed to make sure that also the surveys that we're doing and the data that we're collecting, we receive informed decisions from students. They need to consent to this to taking up those surveys. But most importantly, we needed also to make sure that even when we do this data analytics, we need to be transparent in terms of the process, in terms of the methodology, in terms of the practice that we are engaging in, and how we're using that data for decision making. But also, we needed to also make sure that in our own institution, we have policies and guidelines that are workshopped and are relevant to our space, and also define what type of principles we want to abide by when we want to move into this learning analytics. But most importantly, as our institution is resource constrained, we also needed to look at the infrastructure that we have to make sure that data is integrated to be able to create those single source of truth so that people are able to go to one single source of system and find the information that they require, where the definition are or key indicators are well defined and people are able to talk to the same language of those key indicators. And we also needed to make sure that staff are well capacitated in terms of building those capacity by training staff, workshopping the information, and showing them how to use the data and how to make decisions out of it. What we don't have at the current moment is closing those loop. In terms of the scalability of the process, we still have a huge gap in terms of closing the loop, getting the data to the students, as well as to, we do get the data to the lectures, but not to the students, and also get the feedback from those things. So these considerations are very foundational and not optional. Hence, we say in our own resource constrained environment, we needed to make sure that we are able to deliver in terms of the little bit of work that we do in learning analytics or advancing the learning analytics. But in closing, as I want to summarize my talk for today in terms of what I wanted to share with you and demystify what learning analytics and educational data mining is all about, we need to think about learning analytics as data, process, action in terms of optimization, as well as the learning environment, where we need to also to think about how do we engage with different stakeholders, whether it's learners, lecturers, and who generate those kind of information that fits into the learning analytics. But when we think about data, we need to also think about the type of the sources of data that we want to pull in, and not only just the log engagement data where we look at how many students logged in onto the system, but really look at whether are the students learning, are the students absorbing the content, or are the students knowing they know the knowledge, and also bringing in those learning theories and seeing if they can connect to the data, and so that it is a holistic data source that you use for your learning analytics. But when it comes to the analytics side, is bringing in all those data analytics, learning science, knowledge tracing techniques that you can bring in to optimize the kind of techniques that you use for different sources of data to enable you to be able to get to the outcome where action can be taken. And when you look at those actions, you need to think about the objectives of those actions that you want to make. Is it to change or to transform how students are learning, or is it to look at student success generally as well? But in a nutshell, what I'm trying to get to here is to say, in order for us, if we want to implement this in our institution, we need to do it properly and not only concentrate on one aspect, which most of the time we do concentrate on the analytic and the action, but we don't concentrate on optimizing and stakeholder engagement as well. And on that note, thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I think before we hand over to the next speaker, I think that there's a couple of really great questions in the chat. I think you've spoken to Zara Dean's point, questions about some of the ethical considerations. And I think our next speakers are going to give some examples of how learning analytics have been used to improve student outcomes. On your slide, Elizabeth, about the contextual adaptation, there was a question from Laura about what makes these definitions distinctly South African.
Those definitions are not distinctly South African. That is why I said also we need, as in South Africa or even in Africa, we need to look at them and ask ourselves real questions to say, how do we define learning analytics in our spaces? Like I said, also, we do have a lot of gaps. I'm not going to say things that will get me in trouble. I work with the data. I'm not in the teaching and learning space. But what I've also realized was COVID-19 helped us to move helped the majority of universities to move to online or LMS system. But however, how we develop those LMS systems and how we engage or lecturers engage with the LMS system, for me, it feels like it's still a move from a textbook lecture type of conversation to the LMS system. Now, there is limitation in terms of how do we define learning analytics in that aspect as well, because then there is no difference between the in-classroom and the online learning. And the in-classroom, we also don't really know how to assess whether the students are learning, except after they wrote a test or they wrote an exam. That's when we can look at whether they passed or failed. But if we have defined our learning management system in a way that it can enable us to be able to look at learning and the teaching and learning aspects, then I think we need to define it for our South African higher education, because at this point, we're still going to continue doing the educational data mining, because we will be looking at the past data and looking at what the trends looks like. And when we look at the LMS system, we're going to only concentrate on the engagement data, which is about whether the student have logged in onto the system and whether the student have accessed the material, but it's not about whether the student have learned. So we need to start thinking about how do we define it in the South African context. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And as Laura says, it sounds like we may need to develop some South African specific definitions or parameters. Indeed, like what does it mean for different modes of provision? And I know the CHE recently, there's a new redrafted version of that document, but not to get us too carried away. I just want to go to Dion's question. And look, he was noting that the learning analytics life cycle is from 2015. But I think his question is really useful for today, given the title of the session that includes AI. Given that we're now in the kind of AI era, does that life cycle perhaps look different? And he's asking, are we still struggling practically in closing the loop?
I think I will say yes. I will say yes, we're still struggling, especially in the South African context. For example, I will give just one example in terms of assessment. Even though we talk about the AI and all that, in terms of assessment and in terms of how we assess our students, we still do a blanket approach. There are a whole lot of universities, we don't do differentiated assessment because we don't know where the level of students are at, right? So we also don't know whether the students do grasp with the context, the content and all that. So with AI, it gives us another platform where we can start using that to help us to create those differentiated type of assessment, differentiated type of learning. And I will also bring in not only that there is a huge gap. There is a huge gap in terms of also the learning theories as well. Because also if you think about how students are learning for different modes, anyway, it has to be different. But at the moment, it's the same. We apply the same mode, whether is it online or whether is it face-to-face and all that. So when it comes to the adaptation of that life cycle, I would also urge that we also need to reflect and look at what we currently have and what is missing. Because also, like, for example, I would also say there is still a lot that could change from that life cycle, but there's not a lot of research done. And also it's around publication of this area of learning analytics within the South African context. Because if you look at the literature, the majority of those research that is done, it's about educational data mining. We talk about algorithms, we talk about the analytics, but we're not talking about the feedback loop, whether the students did go back to the system and say, I don't agree with the mark that you gave me, I need to rewrite, or give me a rewrite or something like that. So we don't give, there is no allowance for that. And hence I'm saying there is still It's an opportunity. It's not a big thing, but it's an opportunity for us to start looking at it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. GE, I'm going to keep your question till later, if that's okay, and move on to Jean-Claude. So Dr. Jean-Claude Lemons is the Head of Higher Education Research and Innovation in the Department for Education Innovation at the University of Pretoria, where he leads the University of Pretoria's Education Innovation Research Division, spearheading research and innovation, and initiatives that are using learning analytics and data-driven strategies to enhance student success. And in this capacity, he's played a key role in deploying data-informed approaches across the institution, contributing to an international award on student success technology. Oh, it's exciting. I hope you're going to share more about that with us, Jean-Claude. He's also the principal author on several research publications and has expertise on predictive analytics, student profiling, module reviews, integration of educational technologies such as Blackboard, Power BI, and student feedback systems to improve the quality of teaching, learning, and student success. Over to you, Jean-Claude.
Thank you, Nicola. I take it you can see my screen and that I'm audible.
Yes, we can. You may just want to swap your display so that we don't see your teacher view. At the top,
Okay.
you go swap displays. Seeing your
Swap
notes.
displays, I got that. Is that showing now?
Yep, all sorted.
Excellent. Cool. Thanks for the introduction. I think ChatGPT is overconfident. I should put that through to Monday to see if it gets something better in terms of my biographical description. But nonetheless, colleagues, I've asked to be a bit critical and also give sort of a spread of where we were and where we are today in learning analytics from our perspective. So I'm going to take you through similar things that Elizabeth touched on, but maybe highlight a couple of things that we've been focusing on and where we've been moving towards. So taking you back to 2011, this is where the learning analytics movement started, actually 2010, formalized at the first Learning Analytics and Knowledge Conference in 2011. The definition was formalized as we all have known it up until this point in time. And from there, various authors have jumped on the boat and tried to distinguish learning analytics from the then data analytics or action analytics, as well as educational data mining. And Siemens and Long, with their own definition, tried to distinguish the learning analytics from the academic analytics and educational data mining. And I think from EI, from our university's perspective, we were sort of oscillating in the middle there between these various aspects of learning analytics and educational data mining. Now, just adding on to what Elizabeth said with educational data mining, we're talking about sort of statistical gymnastics and trying to improve the routine, if you think of a gymnastics routine, and perfecting that routine. That is typically what educational data mining is. It's about the algorithm and improving the predictability of that algorithm. So learning analytics uses a lot of the strategies as well as the models and methods and so on for learning analytic purposes. But it's not about the gymnastics. It's about making data-informed decisions, whereas the academic analytics is typically your IR, organizational decision-making, reporting to DHET, and so forth. All right, so if we look at the areas of focus of the early learning analytics, and I'm talking here 2011 up until about 2015, somewhere there. This is what the focus areas of learning analytics was. And arguably one can say, well, we haven't moved quite out of these to some extent, but we'll go through our history. So looking at the dispositional indicators of students, like biographical surveys or academic readiness surveys, academic or activity and performance indicators, your typical engagement indicators, visualizations, trying to make data actionable to lecturers, to academic advisors, and to students, and then typically focus on interventions based on the data that we had there. So informing institutional capacity. So where do we need to put our attention in order to support students? And then the highlight there was your so-called nudges to students. So we see that you haven't registered, for instance, for enough credits. So please go to the student office, a client service center or student center, and add or reduce your credit load, for instance. And then the semi-automated responses, such as alerts to student patterns. So we see you're not logging in. These were the highlights back then. Similarly, 2013, the University of Pretoria hosted the first Southern African Higher Education Learning Analytics Institute, if you like, or forum, where we invited a couple of universities to share their data-driven activities that they had. So it was TUT, UNISA, us, Free State, and I think it was CPUT at that time. And the data that we shared there was typically associated with your action analytics, your typical IR type of information, as well as looking at student biographical information and student demographic information and high school results, and to try and use that to predict student movement or progression or dropout or student success in the first year. Blackboard was also relatively active from the University of Pretoria side, and my colleague, Mr. Dolf Jordan, now Dr. Jordan, presented on Blackboard there specifically and highlighted the various aspects or the various sources of data coming into this learning analytics funnel. And then from that, to try and show impact. But the red part there shows that at that point, we had a challenge to extract value and to institutionalize learning analytics. The argument is, how far have we moved from that perspective? But you can see the various sources of data coming in, and from that, there were various dashboards that was available to the academic staff, and also to a limited extent to the students, although we didn't use that at the time. So these are typical dashboards within or retention center, the retention center within Blackboard, to identify students who have, for instance, not logged in. And then based on that, you can set up an alert, and that alert then kicks off an email to the students. So that's that early alert aspects. From my unit's perspective, we had a very rudimentary tracking early alert system that we worked on, looking at various sources of data, NBT, APS. We looked at information from tutors, the STARS survey, and so on, and then tracking students mainly in the first year. If you recall, back then, there was the movement of the first year experience movement that had an international footprint as well as a national footprint. And I think Stellenbosch University started looking at that in 2009. So our focus was a lot on the first year, and we sort of neglected all the subsequent years. So in that time, we developed the Student Academic Readiness Survey, and based on that, bringing in the factors from the survey as well as the academic results from the students to try and identify students who we thought would need some kind of intervention. And at that sort of same time, we had our first start of the academic, as they now called academic success coaches, but then it was the faculty student advisors. So we needed a group, a unit that would take the information and then get in contact with the student to support those students. So while we were playing around here internationally, the international audience were developed advanced systems like the Purdue Signals, which I think everyone is aware of, to identify students. And then there was also the Notting Hill Trent University, Maryland, Baltimore, looking at providing feedback to students, and then looking at what type of feedback one would need to provide to students in order for them to improve their learning. And then the Open University played a huge role in implementing the Roma framework. So that is how we should do analytics and what are those best practices. You can also see that there were also a lot of EdTech companies that are still around today, and they played, start playing a role in terms of providing a one-stop solution where you can go and plug in data. That was the idea. Plug in data, you can monitor and track them, and then based on that, you can provide interventions. That many of them, like Civitas, Starfish, and so on, had quite advanced statistical analysis at the back end, and was quite advanced for their time. I think their development has been incremental the last couple of years, and many of it has stayed the same. And these are still available to a large extent. So if you look 5 years later, about 2018, I attended another learning analytics conference, and this was on the table. So we need to move away from black box techniques like your random forest and move more towards explainable techniques. We're dealing with teaching and learning, which is very often a process that students follow through. And one needs to explain the process and be able to make decisions based on the various pressure points within the academic career of that module. At that time, the learning analytics was a potential tool to inform high-stakes assessments. They focused on humanizing learning analytics, so getting feedback from the community, engaging lecturers, advisors, and students as co-creators and co-designers for dashboards and so forth. And then importantly, there is grounding learning analytics in educational theories. The first number of years were a lot, it resembled educational data mining a lot, and then it was sort of branded as atheoretical. And 5 years later, the notion started to click. Well, we need to bring in learning theories in order for us to make our data actionable and make our data in such a way that we're able to inform teaching and learning. Okay, and then you can also see the incorporation of metacognition and self-regulation. So there was a large group of sociologists, psychologists, and so on also coming into the field and presenting data on those learning theories, the groundwork for how students learn. But so then our work, we just got more fancy, still doing the same thing, but bringing in dashboards where we bring in engagement data with the student data from PeopleSoft, as well as from surveys and so on, and then doing a mashup of that information so that we can identify students that are active in the module and are passing, or those who are passive and failing, and so forth. And we could then, at an individual student level, identify students based on basic if statements, identify students who we would, and we is the academic success coaches of the academic, faculty student advisors, would then support these students based on the information that we provide here. And then we could also do this over time. So over time within the academic calendar of the module, for instance, identify where students are dropping out: March, May, June, July, and so forth, so that you have those indicators over time. Blackboard was also getting fancier, but maybe just fancier in terms of the colors of the dashboards. It was also more of the same. And this could be disaggregated in terms of, or at the module level for lecturers to use. That slide I showed earlier where we look at the retention center, that is still part of Blackboard. It hasn't changed much. Right, so we also brought in additional information. So when we presented the module information about student success to academic staff, they would typically ask, but how does this module relate to another module, or this subgroup within the module to another subgroup? And we did additional statistical information to show those differences and use that in addition to the dashboards that we provided. So if we're looking at 10 years later, so year about 2021, 25, maybe up until now, maybe not up until this year, last year, the focus was on tracking engagement and learning behaviors. So the tracking of that, more advanced, more detailed, more nuanced, personalized learning through adaptive pathways. You can see a lot of focus on equity, transparency, and privacy concerns, which is also pertinent in South Africa, not only in the global north. AI and machine learning integration, early warning systems, so that's still there. Real-time learner feedback loops, and that's closing the loop, some of the questions that we had. And arguably, are we there, and what are we struggling with? I think from our perspective, it's not that we cannot show the information. Blackboard has that functionality. It is a question of under what conditions do we show that, and we have not come to a consensus of when do we show this, and if we show this, what are the consequences, and also possibly the pushback we might get from SRC and so on. So that is things that we still need to research. And then curriculum and course redesign, which we're moving towards, and I'm going to show you that. And then also support for hybrid and online learning, seeing that is one of our modes of teaching and learning from the CHE. Right, so currently we have this, we've bought into Anthology Reach, which is the Microsoft CRM system. Back then it was called Microsoft CRM, now it's called Anthology Reach. Let me just backtrack. Anthology Reach bought Blackboard. Anthology uses Microsoft CRM system in order to provide a product, and this product is a student relationship management system. It is also an early warning system. It allows the academic success coaches to capture the learning LMS data, or Blackboard data in this case, is integrated within the system. So an advisor can go in, check the academic progress of the students, and then also overall look at the student in relation to other students, and then make decisions in terms of inviting students for support services or not. So here you can see, for instance, are they overdue in terms of submitting? So if the learning management system is used correctly, that's an internal problem. If it is used correctly, this data is to a large extent actionable. It is also structured in a way that I think that it makes sense. In addition to the LMS data, the system also allows you to integrate Power BI dashboards. So we could, from our PeopleSoft data, enrich the Anthology Reach product with individualized data. So we can bring in, for instance, as you see there, appeals indicator, students that went through the appeals process have returned, and there are certain conditions that they need to meet in order to progress further. So we can enrich our data for the academic success coaches to intervene. As a unit, we are not responsible. We implemented the Anthology Reach system. That has now moved to the Department of Student Affairs. The unit where we do higher education research is now sort of one level up. So we're oscillating away from the individual learner analytics area, if you like, into the module and the program analytics environment. So we still provide a learning analytics dashboard. but it is one level up, if you like. We provide this data to the deputy deans as well as to the HODs, where they can use it for management purposes. So looking at teaching and learning from a management perspective. So there's the operational side with Anthology Reach, and we're enriching same data, but for management purposes. And you can see that we also have module analytics data. We provide data or gather and provide data for tutorial attendance, student feedback surveys, as well as the UP readiness survey. And we also do a lot of data management. So we extract data from our PeopleSoft warehouse. We extract data from the HEDA system. We extract data from Snowflake, which houses the Blackboard data, as well as a survey. We pop that into the Power BI environment, and there we manage that information and extract what we need for the various purposes. So I'm going to quickly run you through some of the dashboards. The Learning Analytics dashboard, for instance, you can see it is at a high level. You can only drill down faculty department level, and that provides you an overview of the students at that specific level. Then we provide here ClickUp engagement. So the purpose here is to show ClickUp engagement, or what we call Blackboard is ClickUp. But the purpose here is for the HODs to see, is there activity on ClickUp or Blackboard, so that they can go to the lecturer and say, but we see that there is no activity, or it might not be used correctly, and this is the management tool for them to intervene at the module level. This is the Module Analytics dashboard, where we identify high impact modules. We have our high impact module project, where modules that are below a certain percentage, there are other definitions as well, are requested to go through a module review. And this is where that award was won. So it's not my brilliant work, it is actually the work of the academics that have taken time to reflect on the module and put in strategies and mechanisms to improve the module success rate. I just wrote that up. Unfortunately, all the others' names are not on there as well, so I cannot really take credit for that success. So you can see that we can, well, on the left-hand side, the panel there, we do program to modules. So you're looking at a program, what are those modules, for instance, and module to program, and so forth. So we focus a lot on dashboards and for management purposes. Then we've moved into module analytics. So if there's a module review, we would provide a parameterized report. It is in RStudio, and there we bring in, I'm saying all, but as much information as we can get, as much as information that is accurate and interpretable from Snowflake, from PeopleSoft, and so forth, and bring that in so that we can show our education consultants. They are academic developers, and they support our lecturers to improve on the module and look at assessment as well as the curriculum of the module and so on. So they are the experts in this, and we normally bring them into the group and use the data we have here from ClickUp, Blackboard, as well as the other sources, and do an evaluation of the module relatively in detail. We've also now moved into program analytics. So if you think of modules and programs as a matrix and the students navigating through that matrix, these two sets of reports really need to be used in conjunction. So we bring in quite a bit of information from the program, and then we go into a detail of how this module or how this program consisting of the module impacts the success or the throughput at the program level. And from there, we can also identify modules that are gateway modules, if you like, or high impact modules, and then use that then as a tool for curriculum renewal or program review and so forth. So just to sort of end off, Elizabeth also showed the new definition from Solar on learning analytics. So it's broader. It's more, I think, taking into consideration the practical side, not only the data and the analytics, but also the actioning of that, and also embedding that within teaching and learning. And I think if you use that, you need to incorporate an ecosystem that is equally broad. And then that ecosystem should consist of people looking at the learning activities and the tools, bringing the EdTech tools, as well as AI in education, which is a field on its own, coherent policies and so on, and then looking holistically on the student teaching designs, policies, and so on. So if you have that, then you can design possibly a learning or a course analytics framework. And this is our sort of rudimentary learning or course analytics framework that incorporates the context of lecturer as well as students, as well as the analytics, but also making sure that that's a cycle. And I'm saying making sure we have not perfected that. We maybe are not even close to closing the loop. In some cases, yes, others no. But I think we need to have a framework at least to work with, so that you can communicate what you're trying to achieve at the student level, as well as the module and the program level. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very, very much,
Some
Jean-Claude. That was
resources.
fascinating. And thank you for taking us on a bit of an adventure into the development of learning analytics and how things have grown, not just globally, but also within South Africa, by reflecting back on some of those conferences that you were involved in and what happened there. So we've got a slightly technical question from Dion. Who says, I see the use of MS Form, SharePoint, and other Microsoft systems. Does UP also use or find Fabric and Purview level of data management by MS useful? Not if you know.
Yes, we find it useful. We ran into a bit of trouble now with Microsoft changing or deprecating various aspects within the Microsoft environment. So we use Fabric. We've got Power BI premium licenses, and we use everything that is available to us to extract data from the various sources, and then to provide that to the deans and the deputy deans, as well as to the HODs. Unfortunately, we do not have the university license or an institutional license. We have to buy individual pro licenses for our users, and then that means that we have to all our environments have to be in the pro in a pro license setup for them to be able to see it. So that is our limitation that we currently have, but it's definitely useful.
Thanks very much. And if you are like me and you're wondering, just for colleagues who might also be feeling like, oh, wow, these are a lot of systems, and you're talking about pro licenses, that's probably quite expensive, Jean-Claude. And I imagine many of us, especially, I know within a Southern African context, are using a Moodle LMS. Maybe the SIS, the Student Information System, talks to the LMS, but very often not. How would people in that situation start their journey with a division like yours? Do you have some practical advice?
Yeah, let me try and unpack that of what we have. So we use Oracle for the student information system. That's also where it's a transactional database. Obviously, that is expensive. So it depends on what the various universities have for their student information system. Blackboard, we're using Blackboard, which is obviously also expensive. If universities use Moodle, that information can be extracted with a tool like Power BI. Comparing Power BI, for instance, with Tableau it is way more cheaper. It's much cheaper than Tableau. We had a couple of Tableau licenses, and it did not work out cost effective. To give you an indication, a university license for 100,000 Rand, that's what we have available. We have 250 pro licenses. So that is a good place to start if you want to do relatively large scale data deployment to users. You get about 250 licenses for that. So with Tableau, it's roughly about, I think, 15 to 16,000 Rand per license, where the pro license works out less than 1,000 Rand or something per user. Right. So if you want to do additional development, a premium license for Power BI might be useful, but not necessarily. Right. So that is I think the low cost version for you to do the data analytics. Obviously, if you have expertise in a statistical programming language like R, that would be your cheapest version. Although if you want to go online and house that information, so share it online, then you would need to have other resources available as well. Anthology Reach, which is the CRM system, is very, very expensive. It is a Blackboard anthology product, and it is really expensive. I would not recommend that starting off with. It also takes quite a bit of expertise that you need to develop over time, because you're working with Power Apps, you are working with Power Automations at the back end, and forms and lists and so on. So that's a bit of an upskilling required, but I think the biggest drawback there is the money, the cost of it. And you could build a relatively simple rudimentary system using Power BI to start off with. Even Excel, to some extent, that's where we started. In Excel, I didn't show those, but that's where we started. But Power BI would be probably your best bet in being able to show that with licenses to the audience.
Thanks so much for that advice, Jean-Claude. And just quickly to, Rogers, we're going to have next he's provided some more information about this new learning analytics definition and the process for colleagues who are interested in reading about that. And Elizabeth's also shared info on how to join the SAIR's Learning Analytics SIG. Okay. And then, yeah, we're going to go to our next presenter, and then we're going to come back after our next two presenters and have more discussion. Thanks again, Jean-Luc.
Thank you.
Cool. And next up we have Dr. Rogers Kalisa, who is a postdoctoral researcher at the Department of Education at the University of Oslo. And his research focuses on learning analytics, mobile learning, and computer-supported collaborative learning. He is also an active member of the international research community. He serves on society boards, including the Society for Learning Analytics Research, SOLAR, where he's contributed for 4 years as a student representative and member at large. He's the co-founder of the African Network for Learning Analytics and has a special interest group within the SOLAR dedicated to advancing learning analytics research and practice across Africa. And additionally, he serves on editorial board of the Journal of Learning Analytics. So there's an entire journal devoted to learning analytics for folks who didn't know. And Rogers's work has gained international recognition, earning him the Best Full Paper Award at the LUC 24, which is the conference hosted by SOLAR. So that's quite a big one. It was in Kyoto in Japan. And at the moment, his research focuses on how AI-supported multimodal analytics can support and enhance group collaboration and learning dynamics in professional higher education settings. So thank you so much. We look forward to your presentation, Rogers. If you can just switch your presentation view, we're seeing your, yeah, Awesome. Great.
Nice.
Over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Nicola, for the great introduction. I think I see we're a little bit behind the schedule, so I will try to be very quick as much as possible. So as introduced, my name is Rogers Kalisa, and I'm a postdoc researcher at the University of Oslo in Norway. I'm originally from Uganda, but I did my PhD here in Oslo, and also now doing my postdoc here. So even though the work I'm presenting here, I have a lot of context, and I've been doing a little bit of research around learning analytics and some work as I'm going to present on analytics on the African continent. So in my talk, I think it's going to be very genuine and touching on things that could possibly be making us maybe have a little bit of discussion and around areas around learning analytics and the AI. And I won't go much into the details of the definition because the previous speakers have talked about it, but I wanted to highlight that this is I was part of this task force as part of the exec. So we created a group of around 10 people that were leading the work. And as the report I shared, the main issue behind the definition, the new definition, was mostly because of the increasing kind of confusion about what is learning analytics and what is not. And I think the discussions we have had today kind of talk to this particular problem, because it was realized that in the past conferences, for example, in learning analytics, most people could submit work that is kind of regarded as outside of learning analytics. And the question was, okay, what is analytics? What is learning analytics? Some papers were, for example, focusing much on the analytics part, which is, okay, we have the data, we have all these algorithms and all this kind of stuff, but we don't actually see the L, we don't see the learning into the definition. So that's why this work went through a process. I liked the teaser we had at the beginning of the webinar, where I think Nicola was trying to tell people to think about what they think about analytics, and people mentioning words like dashboards and insights and data and statistics. These were some of the concepts that came up during the definition of learning analytics and the kind of ideas people brought in, and we had to sit together and capture things that are really important. And as we see in this definition, it's not just about the data, it's not about just the techniques, but it's also about the closing the loop. It's about providing these actionable insights to enhance learning and teaching. And that's why now, for work that's getting into the conference, but also the journal, there is that focus of, it's not just about analyzing this big data set, it's not about designing these tools, but do you actually have an element of how this can support learning and teaching in some ways? So that was the background of this work for the community, and you can read the details in the report. And also there is an upcoming podcast which we are going to record this week, and also some reports coming up in the next couple of weeks, so that we get an idea of what this work is all about. In my own work, in line with artificial intelligence and learning analytics, recently we had a paper with colleagues on mapping the landscape of generative artificial intelligence in learning analytics. And here we are trying to say, okay, what are people doing with learning analytics and AI? Because AI, we have to agree, it's something that is very big at the moment, but what are actually people doing with AI in terms of analytics? And in this paper, which you can access later, I won't take too much details. We mostly looked at the loop or the cycle of learning analytics, where we looked at, for example, data pre-processing, methods analysis, implementation, and evaluation. We're trying to see what are people doing with AI in learning analytics. And we found so many papers, for example, touching on using an AI to generate synthetic data, for example. And this is something very important. We talk about the African context, for example, when we talk about learning analytics and use of AI, and sometimes we have limitations of, okay, do I have actually enough data? Is there a possibility of, for example, doing learning analytics without actual data? Can we use synthetic data? If you are in an institution where you are limited by what kind of data you can collect and all the ethical limitations, can you actually make use of AI to generate synthetic data, but that can also allow you to actually do analytics in some way? So we saw a couple of studies doing this, using AI to generate synthetic data. Some are using it to do data processing, for example, just doing transcriptions. I don't know at different institutions. For example, here at UIO, University of Oslo, we have transcribers like audio transcription or video transcriptions. You can just use that for that purpose. Other people are using it for analysis, like automated coding. We have some work around that. It's not as valid, but some people are doing that. But there is also some work. We talked about, is AI, someone had this question in the chat. Do we see AI, for example, supporting closing the interpretative loop or the closing the loop? In my case, I could think about the loop as, can we use the AI, for example, to provide feedback? We don't just collect the data, because if we collect the data, we analyze it, and then we don't feed it back to the stakeholders like the teachers or the students. Are we actually closing the loop? Are we taking data back to the stakeholders? It seemed a little bit hard before, for example, AI, but can AI actually support this in some way? I will share some examples to see how, for example, we've been working with designing some tools to make sure that we provide the feedback back to the teachers and the students in some way. So there is some work around this, but as you can see, it's a very developing area, so not so many studies are doing that. But some are also using analytics to generalize AI in a way. So there is a bunch of different ways of how people are using AI in learning analytics research. And in this paper, you can get a little bit of more details, but it covers, it's preliminary work, but it covers a little bit of a range of things that are actually happening in the field. Besides the practical part, me and colleagues from the US, Professor Ryan Baker, now he moved to Australia, and Professor Barbara Watson and Paul Prinsloo, we had this work around the AI regulations. And as we talk about the use of AI in analytics and our institutions, we also remember and talk about the regulations around the use of AI. In this paper, we looked at AI regulations around the world, and we're trying to see, okay, are the regulations in place actually supporting or actually helping the process of doing learning analytics? And we realize there are a few issues here and there. Like countries around the world are prioritizing different kind of issues. Some countries are not very explicit about how you can use data, for example, AI for research purposes. Some, like I think we found the most comprehensive approach now was the European Union. So they have this AI Act, which is kind of binding, similar to like GDPR. I think this is giving a kind of direction on what kind of data to use and what kind of data you can't use. For example, they talk about not using biometrics data or like facial data or this kind of stuff, which could have an impact on what kind of research we can do. If I can use biometrics data, can I then can you collect data related to affect and all these kind of aspects? So, and also realize that in Africa, we didn't find countries that have actually passed the actual kind of regulations. We saw countries like Egypt, Rwanda, and Mauritius. I think they have some kind of draft regulations, but they're not like binding at the moment, and they don't have very clear kind of strategies that actually can guide research. As I said, I don't have much time to get into this, but there are so many aspects around the regulation aspect, and also even on the African continent, that we need to really work hard. This is not something for researchers, but I think at least at institutional levels, possibly providing guidelines on what is acceptable and not, and also being aware of what is outside our jurisdictions, like what's happening in Europe could affect the way we do research in Africa, because sometimes we borrow on the same kind of LMS and systems. So that's the kind of work we're looking at in that paper. Not much time, but I wanted to highlight very few of the projects I've been working on, at least both in my PhD and postdoc. This was one of the projects. The first one was on Canvas discussion analytics. I know most people use Moodle according from the discussions we had, but this was a simple dashboard that was developed to support teachers in learning design. It could be as not that complicated, but it can be a Moodle. It's an LTI that can be integrated into the Canvas or Moodle, and it was used to track what students are actually doing, what kind of concepts they're actually using. Someone highlighted in the chat, can we actually use analytics to know what students know, for example? So this tool was, I can't go into this, but was trying to, for example, help teachers to see how are the students using concepts in the discussion. And it could aggregate the concepts being used, and the teachers were using this tool in class to actually visualize how some concepts were used. There was one I remember students were discussing a concept of constructivism and constructionism, and students were confusing those words, and that was highlighted in the discussions. And when they were visualized in class, students could see the confusion and how the knowledge was actually being used, and then also trying to see what kind of changes the teachers had to do in the learning design and what they had to focus on in the classroom. There was currently there is this project I'm working with in the postdoc, which is we have 3 cases. We work with the law students, and we work with medical interprofessional education students, who include nurses and doctors and psychologists. And also we have a group of nursing students who are working in simulations. So in these different cases, we collect data, different types of data. So for example, in the legal technology case, which I have responsibility for, we collect data from using microphones. We also collect data from Microsoft Teams, and also audio data from that. So students record meetings there, and we get data from that kind of data. We get data from the logs, but we also use cameras, and but sometimes when we have physical meetings, and also use surveys to collect data. How do we use this data? We have been encouraging using this data for group work, because these projects are like group projects. Then students actually reflect on this data during group meetings about their group projects. We have a component that also analyzes the documents and the content of their meetings. And this data is in each and every meeting. We can actually visualize the key points that we are discussing in the meetings, but we can also summarize their documents they're developing in Teams to show the progress of the document, and also provide some feedback using ChatGPT. So how do we use GPT? Of course, we have a version which is like for the university. So it's an internal GPT model. So we don't use the outside one because of ethical purposes. But we tune it with prompts that are actually related to the course design, and telling it, okay, this is the kind of information. Look at this document and look at these are the course requirements. So the assignments require students to do ABCD. Check this report and see what has been done and what is missing. So that's how we're using it to provide like kind of formative feedback to the students while working on a project over 12 weeks. Reflection on collaboration survey. The dashboard also provides kind of information about how the students think about their collaboration over time. And then the students are made to reflect on these questions. It was very interesting. I'm yet to write a paper about it, but some of these data could actually raise a lot of discussions. We have been talking about like use of very difficult systems, but sometimes you can use very simple data. For example, data about surveys mixed with meetings and documents. It may not be very complex data, but actually helps a lot in terms of student reflections during their collaborative problem solving processes. For sure, it depends on what your focus is, but there is a lot we can actually do with not very complex systems. I'm not saying this was easy, but I don't have enough time. I should have shown you a model, like take you through the actual tool and how it looks. We can do that at the end if I have some time, but I think we don't have time. But I wanted to show you like students have access to such a dashboard. They can see the meetings analytics. Every meeting they have is recorded, and they can go back and see what they talked about. And then the work documents, we use AI to also analyze those documents and give them formative feedback. And then the collaborative experience, they have all the surveys collected, which they actually use to reflect and provide all the different understanding of how the dynamics in the groups actually evolving. As I said, I won't go much into this because of time, but in the other project, we also have in the same, we work with nurses. So the students work with demos, but here we collect data using sensors. So we collect data about heart rate for the students. So the students, we have all these like equivit that they put on their bodies, and we can collect heart rate and acceleration and stress responses, especially this is like a medical cases. And then this data is analyzed and presented as well during debriefing, so that students can actually use it to to see what things they did well and some of things they actually struggled with. My experience around this is the automatic analysis and presentation of data in a meaningful way is not a straightforward thing. It requires a lot of work. The technologies are improving a lot. For example, Teams, Microsoft Teams is improving a lot of systems. For example, we had problems with physical meetings and online meetings. It's very easy to analyze data about online meetings because students are meeting online. We can automatically analyze speaking time and all this kind of stuff. When it came to physical meetings, it was hard because it is hard to actually tag students based on when they are physical, they are all in one space. And for those meetings, what we could do was to only analyze the data from the content, not the speaking time and turns and all this kind of stuff. But actually, with all the improving AI technologies, it's also actually getting better and better, and possibly in future iterations, we could have better results. We use, for example, we analyze data like documents using AI to provide feedback to the students, but of course, it needs a lot of tweaking, very good prompts to make sure that you actually have the right right feedback, that is not like hallucinated and providing things that are not connected at all. So besides that, with all the time we have, I'm so curious about that. We have this learning analytics. We have done some work around learning analytics on the African continent together with my colleague Paul about data privacy, but we also had to work around learning analytics on the African continent and the state of the art. As previous speakers talked about in this paper, we realized limited technical support and access to learning management systems. African researchers not being so visible at like analytics events internationally. And we recommended engaging more in applied studies to justify, for example, maybe investment in learning analytics infrastructure. But we can say over time, I mean, we started this network, an African network for learning analytics research, which we started in 2022, and at the moment it's a special interest group in the Society of Learning Analytics, and I will share a link to enroll if you're interested. Last year in Tokyo, we had some members who came for the conference from Africa, from the Open University of Nigeria. So that was very interesting. And I will share this link so that you can enroll or get into get communication about the network. We are currently revitalizing the leadership and the structure because Paul Princelow retired, but we will be welcoming new members and we keep the work going. Some events, if you want to get to know what's happening. So learning analytics, of course, we have this annual conference, and next year it will be in Bergen. I know the submissions are very soon, end of the month, but there are so many other things you can submit, such as posters and doctoral proposals for students who are doing PhDs. If you have students who are already doing PhDs, I would encourage you, for example, to encourage them to apply for doctor consortium. I'm happy to, if there is any student on the call and is doing something around analytics, you can reach out and I can help maybe how you organize your application, because if you get into the doctor consortium, for example, you can get funded to attend the conference in Norway next year. So many opportunities, and I encourage you to look out. But that was like a very quick talk about what's happening around, and I would be happy to engage in any other kind of discussions and questions if we have time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rogers, and for sharing the links to your research. You also mentioned a podcast that's coming out. Perhaps you can also share the link for where people can join or sign up and, to hear more about all your interesting work that is happening. I think we will take questions in a bit, and first give Christine a chance. So I will also keep your intro a bit shorter, if that's okay. Apologies. So Professor Christine Ayatunde Ofulu is a linguist and social and distance learning expert at the National Open University of Nigeria, where she currently serves as the director of the Regional Institute for Distance and Open Learning. which advances open and distance learning in West Africa. And she also represents Africa on the International Council for Open and Distance Education Quality Committee. And in the field of open and distance learning, she's led various transformative projects, including the development of a research agenda for ODEL and explorations in learning analytics, contributing to policy and practice. And Christine's work continues to impact the twin fields of linguistics and distance education, inspiring research, practice, and capacity building across the continent. So over to you, Christine.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I think a lot has been said already, so I'm going to try and keep mine short. I'm sharing my screen now, and what you're seeing right now is the view of my institution from the National Open University of Nigeria. So I would like to say greetings to everyone and thank you so much for inviting me. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the learning analytics. We started as a project, it's still a project in 2022. And I'm just going to be talking about, how we've gone about it in terms of implementation at the National Open University of Nigeria. I'm Christine Ofule, like you already know, and we'll be focusing on how it has evolved, how it's been applied from individual students to the program and institutional level. I'm also going to be looking at some practical progress as well as challenges and opportunities in higher education across Africa. Basically, it's showcasing our journey and how we've moved, from, data-driven to analytics-driven institution. Now, let me quickly say that this is still very much work in progress. So we're not as far gone as Jean-Claude, whom we've had an opportunity to engage with virtual consultations. So hello, Claude, and then Jean-Claude. And thank you so much for all your help in our journey. We also had an opportunity to consult with the OUK, BART, and that has helped us. So a little bit about our institution at a glance, 120,000 active students. We have 114 study center sites distributed across the country. The map you see there is a map of Nigeria, and each of those logos we have at least about 4 or 5 study centers in a state of different sizes, of course. So the challenge basically that motivated learning analytics for us was the challenge that every open and distance learning institution encounters, which is high student attrition. And of course, the attendance issue about wanting to improve student performance. As you know, we are the largest single mode in West Africa. And this scale at which we operate presents some rich opportunities as well as real challenges, not just for content delivery, but for supporting retention and student success in flexible ways. We have a student population that is diverse in age, in geographical location, and in life experiences. And so it means that, of course, as we know, the traditional approaches often fall short. The one size fits all also does not work. So our embracing learning analytics was a strategic commitment to bring data-driven insights into how our students learn and succeed. And our goal really is to deliver a supportive, flexible, and practical learning experience, regardless of the student's background or location. We feel that learning analytics matters quite a lot, especially given this massive, widely distributed student population like us at the National University of Nigeria. Just a bit about our journey, and this is really, making it really short. It started October 2022. Professor Paul Prinsloo has been a visiting consultant, specifically on this project, among other things. And it started with him facilitating a workshop, basically to sensitize, major stakeholders in the institution. And of course, there was a very positive response to this. And so the work started. It was meant to be like a 3-year journey in terms of planning, but we really know what we would find. So it's been an explorative journey. And so the project was initiated the following month, and then using the Sheila framework, we adopted the Sheila framework. We drafted a learning analytics framework for LOUN. We looked at what would be the role of stakeholders. We looked at, what would be the enablers, and so many other things. So in the following year, we felt that we didn't know what we were, what kinds of data, in what shape they were, in what format. We just knew we had a lot of data. We use Moodle, and we've been using that since about 2015, 16. And so we've had a lot of digital data, but we also do have, some departments that, the data is still, in analog format. And so we decided that the best place to start, even though this was not in the Sheila framework, was to conduct an institutional audit. And at the end of the day, we recognized a critical gap, that we are data rich but information poor. Our data exists in silos, in different departments across the institution, with very little coordination or insight. And so this data audit revealed that there were also duplicated efforts and missed opportunities as well. So to address this, we initiated, a series of workshops so as to obtain buy-in, shift mindsets, create awareness, and placed strong emphasis on a consultative approach. So our conversation basically from that time has gradually moved from seeing students as mere data generators to prioritizing their needs and context. Importantly, we see these reforms aligning with the wider African education priorities, where we believe we should become more context aware, and then of course student-centered analytics, so that we can obtain meaningful impact. So we moved on from there. We turned the first framework into a policy. So we do have a policy on learning analytics. It covers things like governance, privacy, and all of that has been talked about already. And between that time and now, we decided to do a pilot. We identified 3 courses based on the criteria that they were highly subscribed to. They had quite some digital footprints on our LMS, and also there was a high failure rate in those courses. So we identified those 3 courses. And then the levels of analysis that we undertook on those courses at the micro level, looking at the individual, we looked at, the continuous assessments, and completion of those, the engagement on our learning management system, so that we can flag students who may be at risk or trigger direct interventions, ranging from personalized feedback to counseling support. Then at the meso level, we looked at, of course, we were dealing with 3 courses, but we had engagement with faculty, and then here we planned to use analytics to help inform the redesign of those courses, within the larger program, and then target, support for groups that are facing challenges. So for instance, these 3 courses, which you call modules in South Africa, we examine the patterns in engagement, the performance of the students, so that can improve the improvements in curriculum and in teaching, and also even in the design of the course. And finally, at the micro level, like I said, we developed an LA policy and framework, and we're in the process of establishing a central learning intelligence hub, which we hope that data will be aggregated, analyzed, and results are visualized for access by the faculty. This will bring data together from across the institution, and we hope that even beyond informing teaching faculty, so that it can inform curriculum changes and redesign. It will inform strategy, resource allocation, and all of that. This is sort of like the design of trying to design an ecosystem that is more responsive, more effective, and more equitable. Just to give us some idea, from the pilots, these 3 courses, like I said, were identified. And one of the things one of our findings was that we found out that the continuous assessment was not a reliable predictor for exam success. So we would have students who would score highly in the continuous assessments and, would fail in the final exam. And we had also analysis also showed, repeaters, those who would have repeated courses, this same course, and it was the high rates of repeaters, and which does not necessarily translate into better performance. And so we felt this would guide us towards more targeted interventions. So these findings for us, we felt demonstrated that how learning analytics can uncover unexpected patterns that will drive meaningful change. Also in the very design of our programs, which is where we are at now. We're currently, about to embark on the redesign of these 3 courses, and taking into consideration, what will be flagged, and what would be of interest, having done this gone through this pilot. So in terms of the student success initiatives, we are proposing, it's already something we've started. We're proposing an automated early warning system. So if a student fails to log in within 2 weeks of registration or misses a continuous assessment completion, there will be reminders triggered. You already heard this from Jean-Claude. Our counseling unit also recently, we moved into online. So the software department has designed actually, but it hasn't been implemented, but it has designed, and what our findings actually contributed to that design, that it will allow students to schedule appointments online with options for academic, administrative, psychosocial guidance, to ensure that at-risk students have access to support quickly and effectively. We did learn a bit from University of Pretoria, particularly for the counseling part, and we're grateful for that. So we are tying that to linking that. So where we are now is to have all this linked up with our, we have a students support unit that takes, complaints and, inquiries. So that is where they come and need to be linked to the e-counseling platform. Let me move quickly. In terms of the brief I got was to look at, the role of AI, what we think what we're envisaging and future directions. We believe that for AI, already, in fact, and I think this is also the belief of Prof. Prinsloo, and we've been guided by that, that we do have to integrate AI. And particularly, I think the previous speaker already mentioned some of those areas like automated feedback, you know, and all of that. And of course, we are currently drafting an AI policy for the institution. So we're working on making sure there's an alignment between that policy and the learning analytics policy. Integration also in terms of the data governance protocols, in terms of student consent, or someone mentioned that mechanisms, and of course to ensure that the privacy protection measures are in place. Now, ANLA, like you mentioned, we are very much very interested. We actually had hoped that we would have been able to host ANLA at the last conference we hosted for the Open Distance and E-Learning Association of Nigeria. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. But we are hoping that through ANLA, we will be able to share best practices. Capacity building will also be a huge part of that, and we will learn more about our context, because the African context is in different countries and regions is very similar in a lot of ways. I'm almost done. Infrastructure and policy wise, our institution recently invested in a centralized data center and putting in place robust access controls, where we hope that actually it has happened, but it now needs to be linked with the intelligence hub that we want to put in place, but all to make data aggregation seamless. Because that was the first issue that we encountered. And then, of course, I talked about the policy framework, which will guide data handling, privacy, ethics, governance, and stakeholder involvement. And of course, capacity plans for capacity building on analytic skills and ethical best practices. One of the things we discovered also was it was a little bit difficult for us on the LMS, you know, in being able to have our data, because there are tons and tons, a lot of data, and having it in a format that was readable or accessible. And so on that note, we are collaborating with our technical partners, Catalyst, to find a way to structure our data so that it's more accessible. And we are hosting the Moodle Moot conference, and since we are Moodle Moot, one of the largest subscribers on the continent to Moodle Moot, we hope that we will engage with them also, because they do have some level of analytics, but I think it's not robust enough. So what are our key lessons and recommendations? First, we think that what can other African institutions learn from our journey? First is really to begin with a rigorous data audit, because I do believe that a lot of our universities on the continent have the same issue that we faced, so that they can identify the gaps and the opportunities. Second, to ensure that all stakeholders are engaged, from management to faculty to students. Third, to prioritize actionable data. The quality of data is not just about quantity, the quality of the data that would provide, you know, meaningful insights in analysis. Fourth, there's need to build robust frameworks for ethics and governance right from the beginning, not when, you know, it's in place. Fifth is there are some critical success factors that we discovered. There has to be buy-in from the leadership. There has to be support because it's an innovative exercise. There has to be collaboration across departments. And all the stakeholders need to have a student-centered mindset. And of course, there's the need for continuous evaluation and refining, which we had to do as we went along. And so these elements have been vital for us, and I think that they are transferable to other African contexts. So thank you for your attention. Our websites, LinkedIn, email, contacts are there. And then there are the policy I talked about. I provided the QR code for access to that. And one of the many presentations that we have delivered at various conferences. This was LAC 24, and we also recently delivered one at the PCF 11 that just concluded last week. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for sharing the interesting data analytics journey that you've been involved in at Noun. And I mean, it's so fascinating because you guys are massive, very, very, very big institution. And I think as there are no questions at this point, I'm going to be selfish and ask you a question myself. And just something that I've observed is that a lot of these AI tools and plugins, connectors, it's very expensive.
Yes.
So I don't know, is there anything particular that you guys are looking into, or tips that you can give those in Southern Africa who are thinking about this and also have the challenge of funding and scale?
Well, thanks for that question. But I think yes, you're right that the project itself is not cheap because there are infrastructural changes that you and deployments that you have to put in place. So I think any institution needs to really be ready, but then you can start small. We are trying to institutionalize learning analytics across our systems, so that makes it quite big. There are other institutions that will say we just want to use it in a certain area. For instance, maybe student support, or maybe redesign course material, course content. So that way you can, keep it small, depending on what what is the institution's greatest need. But we decided to go the whole hog, the whole way. So I think that's one way costs can be cut. Another is we have a software development unit. So there are some of these interventions that we can, like what we're doing with the e-counseling, that we can do on our own. Another is, I think maybe collaboration, if that is possible, because I know some of these companies, especially the tech companies, if they have a solution, I guess if more institutions buy into that solution, then it might make it cheaper. I think that's one of the advantages with Moodle. It's open source, so you customize, but then when you need a plugin, some of these companies, if they have enough institutions that need that particular plugin, then it sort of pulls down the price a bit. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And I mean, there's some great ones. We've been playing around with Feedback Fruits, which has got automated feedback. And there's also AI assisted grading. That space is just getting very big, very fast. And it's important for us to have, tools that are tried and tested and well designed, although sometimes very expensive. So thanks so much for that. And also the role of the software consortiums in the continent. That's something that's also a good point. If we can, across institutions, when enough of us are using particular things, that's going to become very important with all these different AI tools and such. And thanks for mentioning the Moodle Moot. I've never actually been to one. And you are hosting this year?
Yeah, we're hosting this year. It's next month, 8th to the 10th. And registrations are still open. So you're welcome to Nigeria.
I would love to.
There's actually going to be a learning analytics workshop in the conference. So as part of the conference, so I would encourage, anyone who is able to attend to make it a date. Yeah.
Oh, thanks so much.
You're welcome,
I
Nicola.
think, yeah, if anyone's going, pack me in your bag. Yeah, thanks everyone. I see people have to leave, but thanks so much to all our speakers today for this very, very insightful session. And I know that Janet has mentioned that all the presentations, please send and swallow your presentations or Janet. I'm just going to pop their email addresses in the chat again. But they also, I think, are CC'd in on some of the emails. But if not, yeah, we can do that. And the recording and the presentation will be available on the University of South Africa website and YouTube channel in a few days' time. So thanks again so much to our speakers, and we hope to continue these conversations to grow learning analytics, not just, even though the title for today is South Africa, but I think growing it more broadly across Southern Africa and developing some shared good practices together.
Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Keep well.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Bye, Joanne.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
It's a pleasure, Janet.
Thank you. Amazing.
But I feel you're actually,
Thanks.
are you actually Janet?
No, Janet.
Janet, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nicola.
Thank you very much.
And you managed to keep people on time.
Yes. Well done.
I mean,
Well,
that was,
Roger's had a lot more to say that he could have shared. I think it
I
was
know.
just being very polite. So thank you. Is he still here? No, he's not.
I tell you, Rogers could have his own session.
Yes.
He's done so much.
For
Great.
everybody.
I'm also just hopping onto another meeting, but we'll
Thanks,
catch up,
Janet.
colleagues.
Yeah, no, but in fact,
Thank you.
everybody could have their own session. Like everybody, I wanted to stop and say, tell us more about this, tell us more about that.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, no, thanks very, very much, Nicola.
Pleasure.
You're a star.
Have a great day.
Hi. I don't know what's wrong with my
One of your
my
devices, because you had two
laptop.
on.
Nicola, thank you.
Pleasure.
I was saying this in the background. You were not hearing me.
No worries. It's a pleasure. And I think there's lots of food for thought from today. What we can do for follow-ups. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.